in between series right now. We concluded 24. We're going to begin a brand new series starting June 2nd in the summer. And so I've got some good stuff planned for us between now and then. I thought, Lord, for Mother's Day, often I'm in a series and so it's already picked. But here I've got this sort of free Sunday. God, what topic for Mother's Day that would be a blessing, be encouraging? And so today I've picked the topic of sleep. I want to talk about fatigue. I want to talk about tiredness. Any new moms in here? Any Navy SEALs? Yeah, you get it. Same thing. Yeah. Wanted to talk about rest. The National Sleep Foundation, it's a thing, conducts their annual Sleep in America poll. And they do this every year during Sleep Awareness Week, March 11th through 17th. Anybody Sleep Awareness Week? Yeah? Anybody sleep through it? Yep. Americans, it turns out, are not prioritizing sleep. I love these studies. Like, who signs up for this, right? They take their poll, they call people, I guess at 2 in the morning, presumably. Americans, on average, according to a Gallup survey, are getting, get this, on average, now think about this, according to this, Americans, on average, are getting 6.8 hours of sleep per night. Who are these people, right? Like, because if you're thinking like I'm thinking, you're going, man, there are like sloths hanging out in America right now. They're skewing the average 6.8 hours. That would be great. For some of you, like, it's not enough. I get my 10. In 1942, the average American got 8 hours of sleep. And in 1910, the average was 9 hours of sleep. Because, you didn't have a phone. What else, right? And the one thing all these sleep surveys agree on, according to all this, is very important if you miss the upshot. No matter what, all the sleep surveys agree, do not, under any circumstances, make up for lost sleep during a sermon. That is utterly off limits, right? One of the most famous passages, everybody would agree, there's a difference. Come on, there's a difference between physically tired. There's a difference in the kind of rest you need from physical sleep. And listen, if you have a sleep debt, the most spiritual thing you could do this afternoon, take mom to lunch and then take a nap for the glory of God. That may be. But there's a difference, we would all agree, in like the physical side of this and that kind of spiritual, deep soul rest that we need. You know what I'm talking about? It's not just about the rest of a good night's sleep. It's that deep and abiding soul rest. You can have a bad night's sleep, but if your soul is at rest, you know what I mean? If you got peace, if you got shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken, that soul rest, that's what we're really after. And on the flip side, you could have all the physical sleep in the world, but if your soul's not at rest, if you don't have that deep and abiding rest, there's rest, then there's rest. You know what I mean? The most famous, I think, the most famous passage where Jesus talks about rest is in the end of that 11th chapter of Matthew. Turn to Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28. I've also got it up here on the screen. You can follow along that way, but turn in your Bibles or turn on your Bibles to Matthew 11:28, and you'll see this famous passage. You know this one. You've read this before. Jesus promises not just the rest of a good night's sleep. Jesus promises, that soul rest. What does he say in verse 28? Come to me. Here he's got these disciples going every which way. He's got unrepentant cities that he's preached against. He's got this huge ministry, and in the midst of all this hustle and bustle, he reminds us, it's so simple. Come to me, all you who labor. This translation, all you who are weary and burdened. How many of you memorized this? All you who are weary and heavy laden. And what's his promise? To those who are burdened, to the burned out, to the weary and the burdened, come to me, and what? And I will give you rest. What a promise from King Jesus, that coming to him. Are you burdened? Are you sick of sin? Are you under a heavy laden? Are you under a heavy burden? The only place you're going to find that rest for your souls, you're going to find it in one place. Come to me. You're not going to find it at the end of every dark and blind alley looking here and there. You're not going to find it in a big bank account. You're not going to find it at the bottom of a bottle. You're going to come to me, right? That's where you're going to find that deep and abiding soul rest. His rest is good. Jesus' rest is like a down comforter for your soul on a brisk, crisp, that's better, on a crisp Alabama fall night. next to a crackling fire, as an old Alabama oak gives off its leaf to alight gingerly upon a fall season of bliss. And you drift ever more closely to sleep. So peaceful. I know I'm running the risk of putting you to sleep right now. I understand that. So peaceful, so glorious to be put to sleep in the soul realm by Jesus. Come to me. I'll give you rest. Next verse. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. From gentle in heart and humble in heart. There you'll find rest for your souls. What? I'm sorry. I know. That was on me. I know. Tom, your sermons make babies cry. You do realize that. I know. I had them just asleep, right? But that's my point. Verse 28, are you sleepy? Huh? Are you tired? Does your soul need a nap? You come to Jesus. Come to me. Come to me. I'll give you, yes, blankets and comforters and down pillows and soft. All right, verse 28. And then 29. Take my yoke upon you. Huh? What is this? It's like divine bait and switch. Come to Jesus because he'll give you rest. And then instead of rest, he gives you a yoke. Psych. You thought you were coming for rest. Nah, Jesus calls the burden to himself and then makes them a beast. What do you call an oxen or an animal who wears a yoke? You call him a beast of what? A beast of burden. And here we are. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And instead of rest, instead of a spiritual pillow, he puts a yoke on you. Now, wait. What's that about? Now listen, you might not admit it in church, but have you ever, on your bad days, considered the Christian life burdensome? Many Christians have felt it. Wait, I came to Christ, I came to you, Jesus, because I knew the world wasn't cut it. I was weary and burdened, and there's where I can find that rest. And finally, I can be at rest, overcoming anxiety and overcoming stress and all these things. I can be at rest, and he calls the burden to himself, and instead of that rest, you feel a yoke. Again, you might not admit it in church because it's not very spiritual, but if you did, you wouldn't be the first follower of God to admit it. In Psalm 73, for example, the psalmist, he gets to a point where he feels like following God is such a burden that he looks out and he even says, I envy the lost. There, I said it. He says, they don't seem to have any problems. Their bodies they all seem to be healthy and everything. Here I am serving the Lord, and my life's falling apart. Now, you might not admit it, but it starts to feel like you came to Jesus for rest. You came to him. You heard that preacher in that country church on a Sunday night, and you went forward and you received Christ. You were at a Billy Graham crusade, or you were at a centrifuge camp, and you said yes, and he promised the rest for your soul. And instead of that rest, well, ever since then, it's been burden. I mean, on Sunday, the preacher says, give your all for Christ every day of the week, Monday through Saturday. Give your all at work and in your families. Live for Christ, and you give your all. And then on Sunday, you get there, and you're worn out, and the preacher says, and also, you need to commit more to service to church. You say, but you just told me to give my all to work. Now I got to do this. Now I got to volunteer here. I got to teach this class. I got to serve here. And on top of all that, all that hard-earned money? Yeah, tithe on that. More burden. Begins to feel like a burden. And you can come to a place where you get so close to burnout. Again, I don't think you'd admit it in church, but you envy the lost. You look around on a Sunday morning and go, well, they can just read the newspaper and have a cup of coffee. And me, I'm doing all this, trying to get them out the door and going. These people, and let's face it, when you wear that yoke, can we put a picture of that single yoke back up there? When you look at that, that's a lot of people's model of what it means to serve Jesus. Carry the burden. Now, most people admit Jesus is with you, but he calls you to himself. He slaps that yoke on you, and then he says, all right, go get them. Now listen, I'm with you. Lo, I am with you to the uttermost parts of the earth, right? I mean, I'll be with you, and I'll be cheering for you. I'll be like, but go do it. Go do the mission. Go save the world, right? Go do these things. And I'm with you. And that's our understanding. Now, you tell me, how can Jesus call the burden to himself and then make them a beast of burden? How can you promise rest and then call people to the uttermost parts of the earth, to all this work? How does verse 28's promise of rest line up with verse 29's commandment to take on a yoke? Well, verse 30 sort of helps begin to solve the riddle. Notice, it's very interesting, and it's not what we might expect. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I'll give you rest. Then he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart. You'll find rest for your souls. And then verse 30, for my yoke, he says, is easy, and my burden is light. Now, it's very curious. Show me, where does your yoke and your burden appear in this verse? It's not there. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now we're on to something I'll never forget. I can tell you exactly where I was in the room. 16 years ago, I was in New York City in the world of building upon the work of a church planter. I had a nascent church that was trying to figure out how to do this. I was working as hard as I knew how. Like many young pastors, was working myself maybe without the proper ministry model, and I'm stressed. And I remember being in the Upper West Side at the Metropolitan New York Baptist Association, and our association of Baptist churches had gathered these pastors together. Many of us looked just as frazzled as I did, looking around, and I will never forget, I can tell you where I was in the room when they invited our guest speaker to come. Now, some of you will recognize this speaker's name. He achieved some level of fame in Baptist churches, in evangelical churches in the 90s. He co-authored with a guy named Henry Blackaby a Bible study called Experiencing God. Some of you have been through this study. I've been through it. And this guy's name, who co-authored, his name is Claude King. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of meeting Claude King or of hearing him speak, but how do I say this? Claude is not what you might call a dynamic speaker. And so Claude kind of, they invited Claude, and I'd never heard of the guy at that point. I didn't make the connection of who he was. And they kind of invited him to speak, and he kind of waddles up to the podium. He's got his khakis pulled up too high. I think he had on like a sweater with an embroidered duck, kind of on it, randomly. And he kind of gets up there. But he's also one of these, and very soft-spoken, like me, very quiet, subdued. And he, and he gets up there and very soft-spoken, and he starts talking. And at first you're thinking, oh, what is this? He's one of those guys, within 2 minutes of him speaking, you realize something. This man knows God. And within 2 minutes I realized I'm in the presence of somebody who knows God in a way I don't know God yet. And he very quietly begins for the first time unpacking Matthew 11, 28, 29, 30. These verses that we're talking about today, he unpacked them in a way that forever changed my model of understanding these verses. And I'll never forget, he says, some of you think that Jesus has said, come to me and I'll give you rest, and then put this yoke on you and sent you on your way. He said, that's not the model at all. Jesus doesn't call the people to himself and put a yoke on them and send them on their way. No, that's not what this verse means. No, he says, the mighty Jesus takes one of those big double yokes and puts it on his own mighty shoulders. And then he looks at you and invites you to join him in his work. A double yoke. I remember exactly where I was when it had never occurred to me that Jesus didn't hand me a yoke and say, go live this way. Instead, the mighty Jesus put the yoke on himself. And that's when it dawned on me. The image is not a single yoke, but rather a double yoke. And that's why I've clearly noted them with an X and a check that I made in Microsoft Word art. And I couldn't quite get the check to align. I did the best I could, but you can see it's not actually, but I wanted to show you, right? That's it. There was this Copernican revolution in the way I was looking at ministry, at Christian service, at what it means to be a Christian. My job is not to wear this yoke and to go do great things to God. My job is simply be yoked to King Jesus. That's it. That's your job. That's your mission. Do you realize how life-giving that is? And I'm seeing Claude King say all this, and I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. And the duck's like, I could have told you. Where did this come from? so fast forward a few years, and I'm researching this stuff, and I kid you, can we leave that photo up just for 1 second? I want to tell you where I got this photo. I'm looking, and apparently ranchers actually do this. Now, I know there's people in here who are livestock. I was Googling, and I came across a rancher blog. It's a thing. Jackie's like, what are you doing? Research! This rancher blog, you can't make this up. The guy's talking about a new oxen, a newly acquired oxen, a rookie oxen is probably what they call them, right? A noob, a moob, whatever. This new oxen, and he says, when I get a new oxen, how do you train him up? How do you get him to plow the field correctly and to do everything? This is what he says. You can't make this up. He says, when I get a new animal, in the beginning, I would never send them out on a yoke. Instead, I double yoked them to an old, wizened, experienced ox. And if you look carefully, does not this old ox, he looks like cynical and, yeah, I've been here before, kid, stick with me, right? He puts him next to this big, experienced ox, and he says, in the beginning, this is what blew me away. He said, in the beginning, that ox, all he has to do is be yoked to the big ox. He'll go where the big ox goes. He'll go this way. He'll pull at the right speed. This is what blew me away. He said, in the beginning, that new ox actually does very little, if any, of the pulling. He just has to stay yoked to the ox. Is that not discipleship? Does none of the pulling, just yoked to the... What did Jesus say in John chapter 15, verse 5? Remain in me and I'll remain in you. Apart from me, you can do what? You can do nothing. Just stay yoked to King Jesus. Now, I don't know about you. For me, that picture's not even accurate. For some of you feel this way. When you first started following Jesus, not only did you not do any of the pulling, your little hooves didn't even touch the soil, right? You're just up there kind of flailing. Jesus is like, I got you. Some of you are still that way. Oh, I'm worried I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough work for you, King Jesus. I'm not doing enough. Jesus is like, you're actually doing nothing. Don't Christians feel that way? Come on, don't Christians feel that way? They sit here week after week in church and go, I'm not doing enough. I'm not giving enough. I'm not enough. Well, you're not enough if your model is that single yoke. Go, pull. Oh, I'm not pulling enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not giving enough. I'm not doing enough. But who said that was your mission? Your mission is to be yoked to Jesus, to abide in Him. He'll do the pulling. It's up to Him. It's not up to you. Obviously, our issues come when we think that there's a sense in which, we work for God instead of understanding our mission is to be yoked to Him. Now, so far I've said yoked to Him, locked in step with Jesus. At this point in the message, there could be an objection. And someone, particularly a seeker, someone who maybe is not yet committed to the claims of Jesus Christ or discipleship, at this point you could object and you could say, well, now hold on. Tom, maybe I don't like the idea of being yoked to Jesus. Maybe I don't like the idea of being under the authority of God. I want to be free. I want to be a free range oxen, right? I want to be out there on the range doing what I want. I want to be free. I don't want to be yoked to King Jesus. So I don't know. When I come to church, you talk about living for the Lord and doing all these things. I don't want to be yoked. This is what I would reply to that. You are delusional. I love you. Therefore, you need to know you are delusional. You are delusional because even if you don't believe the Bible, believe Bob Dylan, you got to serve somebody. He said it in Slow Train Coming, right? Did he not? In 1972, he said it. You got to serve somebody, and he's absolutely right. Everybody serves somebody. You will be yoked. Listen to me. You are already yoked to someone or something. And if you say, not me, I don't serve anything. I do what I want. I'm my own person. Then you are yoked to yourself. It's its own form of being yoked. But everybody everywhere is yoked to something or someone. Listen to me carefully. You are right now yoked to something or someone. And if it is not Jesus, it will lead to death. Okay? There's no two ways about it. You work all your life for sin, and your retirement pension is death. You will be yoked to someone or something. Don't think that there's come under the authority of God or freedom. There is no freedom except under the authority of God. Everything else lead to death. I wanted to show you this, that you are yoked to something. So I Googled sad cows. This is a life of not being. It's not like you're free. Click, you came to Jesus and He put you in some sort of yoke and now you're entrapped to Jesus. No. This is our state. sorry and pitiful and yoked to sin and our future death, Christ can set us free to be. Yeah, that's us. There you go. Happy cow. You see the research I do for you guys. Yeah. So the moral of the story, abide in Jesus. Abide in Jesus. We get ourselves into trouble when we try to think that we work for God instead of there's a sense in which working alongside. Claude King puts it this way. He says, God's yoke for you is custom fitted. God's yoke for you is custom fitted. He invites you to join him in his work. You know, there's a sense in which the law's demands are not going away. It's not like, God's holiness somehow shrinks. No, you can't bear the law's demands. You can't bear that burden. Ponder that for a second. You cannot. You can't bear the holiness of God. You'd be crushed under that burden. But Jesus can. Jesus can. And he invites you to join him in his work. I keep saying abide in Jesus. What do I mean? Well, let's get very practical. For starters, what about your daily devotional time with God? Is your heart, your temperature of your heart, is it hot, burning hot with love for God? Are you on fire for the Lord, right? Are you spending time in him? Do you love him? Are you ministering out of the overflow? All these things collectively throughout the day, do you remember him throughout your work to abide with him? The attempt to work for God in our own power and try to serve God, here's the danger. We'll try to serve God without cultivating a relationship with him. Leads us to a bad place. The classic example of this, the biblical living out of Matthew 11, 28, 29, and 30 has to be. The text par excellence of this shown in real life has to be the story of, in the end of Luke 10, of Mary and Martha. Does it not? Any of you know this story? Yeah, at the end of the gospel, at the end of the 10th chapter of Luke, Jesus shows up at these people's house in Bethany, Martha and her sister Mary, and Jesus is coming, and these two women have two very different reactions, right? Mary hears, Jesus is coming, and one sister thinks, oh, Jesus is coming. We'll have more time to spend with him and listen to his teachings and learn from him. And the other sister hears Jesus coming and thinks, Jesus is coming! He should have called, right? Or sent a text. And he's like, technically through the prophet Isaiah, we should have. Anyway, she begins readying all these preparations, right? It's one thing when your local rabbi shows up unannounced, but this is Jesus, right? Jesus. He comes in. Oh, Jesus, we're so glad you're here. Right? Still trying to get things ready, still trying to prepare. Mary just sits right down. There's a cushion there on the floor. Jesus, sit here. Plops him down in the lazy boy. And just kind of sitting there listening. Martha's like, there's really no time for that. There's so much to do, right? Begins to scurry around, trying to clean things up, comes back, and there's Mary just listening to Jesus. Oh, tell it again, Jesus, tell it again. Go on. So a man had 100 sheep, you say, and one ran off? Okay, then what happened? Martha goes back to offer something to eat, right? Gets the devil's food, angel food. It's Jesus, angel food cake, right? Comes back out. Jesus, would you like something to eat? Mary reaches for it. No, not for you, for Jesus, right? There's no time to share when you're working for the Lord, right? So she's, Mary, she thinks, sure could use a little help out here. Mary's like, no, really, you should sit down. You should listen to this guy. Right? Goes and makes more preparations. Come on, Lazarus, you're no help. I'm telling you, I'm really sick. Oh, come on, Lazarus, you're not going to die. See, it's funny because he does, in fact, die. Right? And so she goes, finally, she's had enough. And Mary is not getting the hint. Now, she didn't want to blow up your spot here, Mary. I didn't want to do this to you, but I'm sorry, you've left me no choice. And what does she say? She sees Jesus. Jesus is a God of justice. He's a God of fair play, and he can see what's happening here. She's doing all the work, and Mary's not helping. So what does she say to Jesus? She went up to him and said, Lord, I'm sorry to do this, Mary, you had your chance. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to, you're always in a bad place when you begin commanding the Lord Jesus on what he has to do, right? Tell her to help me. I'm sorry, Mary. You brought this on yourself. What does Jesus say? It's interesting. He doesn't rebuke her. He doesn't say, oh, Martha, 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 you will be castigated in sermons by preachers for the next 2,000 years. You will be a pariah of the church. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of women will sigh and say, oh, I'm a Martha, all because of this moment. He doesn't say any of that. He says instead, with great love, Martha, Martha. He just says it like it is. You're anxious and you're troubled about many things. And he never says those things are bad. He says one thing is truly needful. And here we imagine he points at himself. One thing's truly needful. And Mary's chosen that good thing, and I'm not going to take it away from her. Martha's problem was not that she was serving. Enough with the guilt about being a Martha. Martha gets beaten up on so much, and it's crazy. And in John 11, she's the one who says, I believe you're the resurrection and the life. She's full of faith. If you're a Martha, praise God. Martha's a godly saint. But in this particular moment, she fell prey to the temptation of our godly saints. And what our godly saints will do sometimes is they'll get so caught up in working for the Lord, they'll neglect a relationship with the Lord somewhere along the way. Does that make sense? He's not beating her up. There's no need, right? And in fact, in John 12, she serves, and she serves out of the abundance, and there's no comment that she was somehow doing a bad thing, right? But here we see that we have someone who's serving the Lord without cultivating a relationship with him, bypassing the Lord, like working so hard. But what about your own devotional time with the Lord? What about your own relationship with God? Now, at this point in the sermon, when anytime Mary and Martha comes up, this is when I always want to speak on behalf of the Marthas, and you see where my heart is on. But if I'm in the pew, this is what I always want to say when they're like, let's be Marys, let's sit at the feet of Jesus and not be scurrying around, hustle and bustle with so much activity. We can't be so busy for the Lord that we miss the Lord himself. This is where I always want to be like, hold up. All right, preacher, say we all did that. Next Sunday, we're all just going to be Mary. We're all just going to sit at Jesus' feet and worship and praise. Let me ask you one question, preacher. Who's with the kids in the nursery? Because while we're up here being Mary, we go down there, it's Lord of the Flies. The war paint, they're killing each other, right? Hey, that's all fun and games. We could all be married, but who's going to keep it in the nursery, right? Well, this is what I would say to me if I objected to me in my own sermon. That got complicated. This would be all I could think to say. That is a very valid objection, and I'm not sure what to do with that. But in this particular moment in Luke 10, I'll tell you this. If you asked me, if Martha had just plopped right down next to Mary, who would have cooked the dinner that night? Best I can figure, my answer is no one. And they just would not have had dinner one night. But they would have had an extra hour with the very bread of life. And you say, well, by that logic, nothing would ever get done in this church except everybody would be in intimate fellowship with Jesus. Yeah, I can live with that. It's worth a shot. To guard our people's relationship with God, to love him. I know we get so caught up in metrics and impact and all that stuff. It really comes down, come to me. Abide with me. God's going to do great things. He already has through this church, but he's the one doing the pulling. We're just yoked to Jesus. We go where he goes. Otherwise, we do all this work. Moms, you work so hard. You're doing all this stuff. And without you, I know in my family, we wouldn't eat. We wouldn't get to school. I wouldn't have shoes or nothing. Disaster. So thank you. But at the end of it all, what is the one needful thing? Oh, it's to abide with him. It's to abide in him. I want to wrap this up and illustrate in a couple ways. One is I met a real life Mary. A real life Mary once. He was a 6'6" Russian named Sergio. Not who you'd think, right? And he was a kind of a legend in New York ministry. Sergio, everybody called him Serge, just humongous. I think his mom was Russian. His dad was a bear, and he was huge. And he the Brontosaurus or something, I don't know. And he came over and was helping. Okay, he was teaching English as a second language to people from Uzbekistan. These Uzbekis predominantly were Jewish, and many of them had never heard the gospel or anything. He was teaching them English so that if they wanted, they'd come back for a Bible study and learn more about God, right? He was sharing the gospel through the ministry of English as a second language. It was incredible, and he was reaching all these people. Well, I found out, he's a hero to many of us, and I found out he was packing up his whole family, and he was leaving this successful ministry and moving to Ukraine. And he was going to the Ukraine to begin a church planting movement that was also not only a church plant, it was also an orphanage. I mean, can you imagine like a more incredible ministry? It's church planting, but it's also this orphanage, taking care of all these orphans in the Ukraine. Packed up his family. He had just, I got word that he had just rented one of those shipping containers. He'd sold everything he could, everything else he fit in the container, and was sitting it over there. And I see him one day in the bookstore. This is like 2 weeks before he leaves. And I saw him, and I was like, Serge, I heard the word. I heard you leave. This is incredible. You're going to Ukraine. I was talking all this stuff. And I'm going on and on. He was telling me more about it. And at some point, I remember this like it was yesterday. At some point, I looked at him and I was like, Sergio, what an incredible ministry. Think of the impact you're going to have for the kingdom of God. And he laughed at me. He laughed. Like only a big Russian bear can laugh, right? Hosky. And he takes this big Russian paw and he puts it on my shoulder and he looks down at me. And he says, oh, Tom, think about the impact you're going to have, is right? He says, Tom, I don't go to Ukraine to make impact. I go to Ukraine to sit at Jesus' feet. Impact up to God. I was like, speak again, Russian angel. Your servant, and there's Claude King's duck. I tried to tell you this years ago, right? But it all came together. Like, he's a real life Mary. He gets it. You don't go to Russia to make impact. You go to Russia to sit at Jesus' feet, and the impact's up to God. We commissioned our mission team to Tapachula, Mexico. They're not going to Tapachula, Mexico to go change Tapachula. They're going to sit at the feet of Jesus in Tapachula. And you, with your ministry this week at work, you're going to sit at Jesus' feet throughout your work. You're going to sit at Jesus' feet in your school. You're going to sit at Jesus' feet throughout this county, throughout this nation, throughout the world. We're going to sit at Jesus' feet, and he does the work. What's our job then? What do we do in all this? Abide with him. Stay in step with him. The impact, it's up to him. I'm going to ask Chuck to come and lead us in a time of response. I can't remember if I've shared this story or not. I had this plastic lawnmower as a kid, this Fisher-Price lawnmower. You know the one? Did you have one like this? You'd move, and there were mechanics made it like pop, 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 pop when you move, and it kind of made the sound of a lawnmower. And played with it and stuff. My dad, his job was to mow the lawn at the church, at this little church in Cincinnati, Ohio. We moved from Cincinnati to Murray, Kentucky when I was 5. So this must have been when I was just 4 years old. And I remember Dad, hey, you want to go do something today? And us not tell Mom about it. I was like, this is going to be fun, right? And so he says, why don't you come with me to cut the grass, to mow the lawn? And so he loads up his push mower in the back of the truck, and then he loads up my little Fisher-Price lawnmower, in the back of the truck there. And we drive off, and he gets there and unloads both mowers, and he takes his mower and cranks it, big loud smoke everywhere and blades turning, and I act like I'm starting mine, and there we take off, and Dad's going through the thick grass, pushing it around, and I'm right behind him. I thought, what a sight we must be for DHR to think, But there we were, and going around, and grass is going around, and blades, and I'm staying right behind him, right, and making our way around. And we get to the end there, and the mower's cut off, and you understand, my mower didn't have any blades, right? It's not a functional. Okay, cool. And Dad wipes the sweat from his brow, and I'm looking at him. And, now you tell me how ridiculous it would be. We're looking out at this beauty. Is there anything prettier than a fresh cut lawn? And how ridiculous. But What does a 4-year-old say to his dad at the end of that? Whew. I tell you what, Dad, we sure cut a good lawn today, didn't we? Right? Now pause. From an outsider, right? Anybody can see. You would look at that and you would say, kid, you're delusional. I mean, to think that I know you're saying we. You realize how little you did in this process, right? You do realize your mower didn't even have any blades, right? I mean, you do realize you probably got in your dad's way more than you actually aided in the service of the cutting of the lawn. You do realize that, right? But Dad didn't say any of that to me. My dad said to me exactly what you would say to your 4-year-old kid. He said, yes, we did, son. Well done. See? At the end of all of our service to the Lord, every one of us, at the end of all your mothering, at the end of, when all your kids, they turned out great, and look at them. It's great. At the end of all that, and then generation after that, and then generation after that. Listen, there's going to be a point when not a single one of us, if the Lord tarries, not a single one of us, it'll be the next generation that's meeting in here, meeting wherever, meeting in space, or whatever they figure out. You understand? Church has been around 140 years. It's going to be around long after us. So when all the dust settles from all the ministry that God's given us to do in this season for our generation, for the glory of God, you do realize when the dust settles and we go see King Jesus, you do realize when we say to him, Lord, what an impact we made in Coleman, right? I mean, revival and growth and people saved and baptized. And we went to Tapachula and to Peru and to Malawi and went to the uttermost parts of the earth. I mean, people were saved and lives were changed. Didn't we do a great job? You do realize. Pause. From an outside observer, someone could say to you, you do realize your mower didn't have any blades, right? What did you say? Apart from me, you can do what? Nothing. You can't create a revival. You can't change a heart. You can't break someone free of the chains of addiction. You can do nothing but be yoked to him who can do all things. And in that moment, isn't it interesting that his promise, it's not that he'll look at us and give us a lecture on how he did it all, though he did. Instead, what's his words? Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into your master's rest. A soul rest every day, living out of the overflow of abiding with him, yoked to him. Because I tell you the secret of that lawnmower story, I wasn't there because I liked grass. I wasn't there because I liked mowing the lawn necessarily. I was there because I wanted to be where my Father was. I wanted to walk where he walked. I wanted to stay in step with him out of love for my Father. Oh, do you love him? Abide with him this week. We'll leave the impact up to him. Abide with him. Let's pray. God, grant that we would abide with you, that we would take seriously Matthew 11:28, and we would run to you this morning, come to you. For everyone who's weary and heavy laden, sick of sin and burdened by so much anxiety, and they would take your yoke, custom fitted for them, and lay it just as you've laid your yoke upon your shoulders. We would join, be yoked to you this week and abide in you. And God, grant that if anybody is here and they've not yet received you as Lord and Savior, they've never even begun abiding in you, today would be that day they begin the journey and path of a disciple, abiding in you every day. And thank you, God, that in you and you alone we can find that rest. Only your yoke is easy. Only your burden is light. Every other yoke and burden will crush us. And thank you that this church can walk this week in the free and easy rhythms of his grace. Thank you for your grace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.